right, we are back following a lunch break on the fifth day of a hearing in EIB 21-27. We've come to the 1 p.m. public comment session. We do have public comment sessions every day at 9, 1, and 5. Public comment is taken by audio, not video, is taken under oath, and is limited to 5 minutes. In the event you have longer comment, please submit it in writing to Pam Jones, the board administrator. These are the folks who reached out via email to the administrator, and I'll call on you in this order: Charles Wendler, Margaret Bell, Kathy Miller, Karen Bonin, Paige Knight, Marlies Leslie, Renee Walters, and John Ellis. In the event I did not call your name and you wish to offer comment at this time, please reach out through the chat. Chat is enabled for everyone. Of course, we also have 15 more opportunities for comment. Let me look first for Mr. Wendler. Don't see Mr. Wendler. I do see a call-in user. Let me unmute caller number 12. Caller 12, would you identify yourself, please? I don't think that was a person. All right, I don't see any other call-in users. So, I'm sorry, Member Bitzer?
Yeah, I think that caller had two microphones going, and therefore that was why you heard the bum bum bum. It was an echo.
Oh, okay. I thought maybe it was a fax machine or something. Okay.
You might give that one another try and see if they can turn one of their microphones off so they don't do that.
Okay, thank you. And caller 12 just disappeared. Maybe to call back in. All right. So I don't see Charles Wendler on the platform. If he rejoins us, I'm happy to call on him. Let's see. The next one is Margaret Bell. I see Ms. Bell. Ms. Bell, I'm unmuting you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, very clearly. Thank you. If you would spell your name, please.
Margaret.
Thank you, and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm going to start your 5 minutes now.
My name is Margaret Bell. I want to thank the members of the Environmental Improvement Board and Ms. Orth for this opportunity to provide comment. I am an Albuquerque resident. I'm 73 years old, recently retired. And even in the short time I have remaining, I am terrified of the future with its prospect of never-ending fires, floods, and increasing drought. Unfortunately, the past and the present have also been terrifying for the many New Mexicans who have been living with methane leaks for decades and suffering the health effects, and for farmers and ranchers trying to survive our years of mega drought. Now farmers are being told not to plant due to lack of water. What happens to our food supply when that becomes more pervasive? It is horrifying to know that New Mexico is a significant contributor to global warming by emitting over 1 million metric tons of methane each year through venting, flaring, and leaks. Since methane is a powerful greenhouse gas, 84 times more potent than carbon dioxide in the short term. The New Mexico Environment Department has put forward a strong proposal to reduce ozone-forming VOCs and methane release by the oil and gas industry. The department's proposed ozone precursor regulations for oil and natural gas production, processing, storage, and transmission sources include rules that address equipment leaks and malfunctions. They are a good start. Leaks due to equipment malfunction and lack of maintenance account for 70% of the oil and gas industry's methane emissions statewide. However, the second largest source of oil and gas methane emissions are pneumatic controllers, and they are not included in the precursor rule. And I don't care if a pneumatic controller costs $55 or $5,500. The cost to our communities in terms of public health and damage to our planet far outweigh the cost to the oil and gas industry of stronger rules for pneumatic controllers. And we've been paying that price for decades. while the oil and gas industry has profited from our resources and pollutes our air, land, and water. I am asking the Environmental Board to make 3 critical additions to the final rule, which are essential to meeting Governor Lujan Grisham's goal of enacting the country's toughest methane and air pollution rules. I am asking that the final rule protect those living closest to development by requiring more frequent inspections to find and fix leaks. That the final rule be strengthened to ensure New Mexico incorporates leading approaches to address pollution during well completions. It should require that operators capture or combust emissions during completions, including the initial flowback stage, as Colorado now requires. And the final rule must strengthen requirements to cut pollution from pneumatic controllers used in oil and gas production. The New Mexico Environment Department must require oil and gas companies to inspect pneumatics for leaks and accelerate the timeline to retrofit equipment with zero bleed or zero emission pneumatic controllers, as we have no more time to spare. The fact that New Mexico is a major contributor to the climate crisis also means we can be a significant part of the solution through major methane reduction. The New Mexico Environment Department's final rule must do more than address the 70% of emissions due to equipment malfunction and lack of maintenance. The final rule must be strengthened with those 3 additions to do the complete job our communities and the planet need right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bell. Okay, we'll turn now to Kathy Miller. Try K. Miller. I see K. Miller. Ms. Miller, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I can hear you as well. If you would please spell your name.
KathyMiller.
Thank you. Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that you will tell the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. I'll start your 5 minutes now.
Hello, my name is Kathy Miller. I'm a native New Mexican and I live in Otero County, New Mexico. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. After reading the petition for regulatory change concerning New Mexico's oil and gas industry, I'm concerned about the new regulations and how the regulations will impact directly and indirectly my county and our state. While I appreciate any effort that encourages stewardship of the land and our natural resources, I question how the regulations will impact the almost $26 million and 30% of our state's annual budget that the oil and gas industry brings to our state, funding education, public safety, and other life needs. As I understand it, the Ozone Attainment Initiative, the OAT, is the National Ambient Air Quality Standards for ozone are currently in place. Governor Grisham established an executive order which directed the New Mexico Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resources Department to jointly develop a statewide enforceable regulatory framework. Did you know that New Mexico gas and oil reports that emissions have since 2011 been reduced by 51% while increasing production of 125%? It seems the oil and gas industry is already addressing emission concerns. The petition lists participants who work to create the regulatory document, including neighboring state standards and engineers, tech professors, experts with expertise in various fields of the oil and gas industry, to name a few. And I want you to know I appreciate the work that has been done and the diverse panel that was assembled. However, I have a few suggestions. The petition is very specific in addressing regulatory measures to reduce oil field emissions, including records and more records, meters and measurements of emissions, replacing or purchasing new equipment or gas engines while maintaining a yearly emissions goal. Sadly, I found only a couple of references that address the impact these regulatory measures might have on the economy of New Mexico, and specifically the economic impact on the residents of Southeast New Mexico. Public forums after the fact will be held. And I understand that's a good thing, but is this the only vehicle to address the economic impacts for the region and our state? As far as I can determine, there is no plan to make up for the economic shortfall our state will most likely experience. There is no plan to help those whose jobs and communities will be impacted. There is no mention of the petition's management and monitoring costs for New Mexico taxpayers. As a former teacher, retired teacher, my wise principal always encouraged us teachers to bring a solution if you have a problem and to address the problems your solution might create. The economic impact is a problem. Another concern I have is item 2, basis and need for proposed regulations. Paragraph 1 states or says ozone was listed. I get it. Working to encourage this precious resource to burn cleaner is noble. Paragraph 2, man-made and non-human causes. Does this includes forest fires, but I want to know, does it also include man-made wood-burning stoves used for heat? Will wood heat become an emission concern? And along those lines, will cattle raising become an environmental concern? Are these issues on the table, even though they are unrelated to the oil and gas industry? Paragraph 3 lists ozone side effects to humans and plants, and I quote, the words can inflame airways, causing chest pains, can be more serious to people with lung disease. Has this issue been studied and documented? If health is listed as a reason as to why we need this petition that is going to drastically change the oil and gas industry and economic stability of New Mexico, we need health data that scientifically supports this statement. Paragraph 3 also states that the health effects of high ozone concentration are disproportionately borne by low income and minority communities. This statement also needs data to scientifically support this premise. Please see page 6. Finally, section 7425B1 states that the board shall adopt, publish, amend, and repeal rules and standards consistent with the Air Quality Control Act to attain and maintain national ambient air quality standards and prevent or abate air pollution. I'm not really sure, but I think you guys that are part of the panel. Are you the environmental board? Is that correct?
Ms. Miller, you've reached 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Please wrap up.
Okay. I'm sorry? Oh, okay. I want to know who the local board is. Who is the ultimate authority over the petition? Does the local board have the authority according to sections E, F, G, H to tax, inspect, regulate emissions of private citizens and vehicles of citizens unrelated to the oil and gas industry? In closing, no doubt protecting our environment is a noble cause. However, regulation upon regulation which passes from board to board loses its objective. How can innovation flourish in this environment? How can New Mexico survive without the heartbeat of the oil and gas industry, which contributes 30% of our state revenue? If this industry is forced to slow production due to regulations or worse, cancel production because of upwards of 33 mandates, how will New Mexico survive? We don't need mandates and environmental boards. We need innovation and cooperation to address this very real problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Next, it will be Karen Bonin. And if I'm mispronouncing your name, I'm sorry. I've unmuted you. Can you hear me? Ms. Bonin?
Yes, my name is Karen Bonin. I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Hold on 1 second, please. If you would please spell your name.
Oh. Say it again?
Spell your name, please.
Oh, spell it, yes. Karen, B like boy, O-N like Nancy, I-M like Mary, E. Bonin.
Thank you. And if you would raise your right hand, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
I do.
Thank you. I'm going to start your 5 minutes now.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Karen Bonin. I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Thank you very much for the opportunity to provide comment. As an elementary school teacher, now retired, I have had, sadly, much opportunity to observe firsthand the impacts of asthma on children. Asthma rates are higher in areas with high ozone pollution. I'm sure the EIB has access to the studies that show this. and other air contaminants resulting from the inadequately regulated oil and gas production in our state and many other inadequately regulated sources. Children with asthma miss days of school because of asthma-related illnesses. This costs them. It costs them part of their education. It costs them being able to participate in sports sometimes. And also, children with asthma are at higher risk if they become infected with COVID-19. Most children under 12 have yet to receive the COVID vaccine. And even once they are vaccinated, they are still at risk of breakthrough infections. And not only that, they can spread the virus. Anything that makes our children more vulnerable to serious illness must be curbed. You can't put a price on that. In addition, elderly people are at risk. That includes me. And more important, it includes my husband who has comorbidities. Also, people in the middle between childhood and elderhood are at risk. They're at risk of long COVID, damaging their ability to work and contribute to our economy. And again, anything that increases risk of illness in this time of pandemic must be addressed vigorously and aggressively. You can't put a price on human health. It has to be protected. I think that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bonin. We move now to page 9. No, I go from M to R here on the platform. And then Marlies Leslie.
I'm here.
Hello.
Hello,
Uh,
Marlies
yes.
Leslie.
Yes. Hello.
Hello.
Would you spell your name, please?
Yes, Marlies Lesley.
If you would raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
I do.
Thank you. I'm going to start your 5 minutes now.
I would like to thank the board for allowing this time for public comments. My name is Marlies Leslie, and I am here with New Mexico IPL. My faith community is La Mesa Presbyterian Church, Albuquerque. I am speaking today to encourage the EIB to vote to support and strengthen the New Mexico Environment Department's draft rule to address ozone precursor pollutants from oil and gas operations. This rule is critical for protecting both our health and climate by reducing smog-forming volatile organic compounds as well as methane. My remarks today focus on methane. Close to 25 years ago, my husband and I retired, moved to New Mexico, and bought property in the East Mountain area. We had not lived in New Mexico long before we began hearing about the problem of methane gas. We also heard about the many abandoned and orphaned oil and gas wells across the state and how they were a source of methane leaks. Also, that oil and gas operations in New Mexico release more than 1.1 million metric tons of methane every year. Methane is a powerful climate change pollutant responsible for 25% of the warming we are experiencing today. Here are 3 improvements that the Environment Department should adopt to protect communities and address major sources of pollution. 1, to protect those living closest to development by requiring more inspection to find and fix leaks. 2, ensure strong requirements for operators to control pollution during the completion of an oil or gas well. 3, strengthen requirements to cut pollution for pneumatic controllers that are used in oil and gas production. New Mexico Environmental Department should require companies to inspect their equipment for leaks and accelerate the time to fix their equipment with zero bleed or zero emission. The damage done to the health of those that live closest to these operations and the damage done to our climate should be enough in themselves to adopt these proposals. The gas and oil industry claims that New Mexico needs them because of the jobs and revenues they provide. However, those jobs and revenues are unstable, and many are going away as more clean energy is developed. There is growing evidence that making the changes we need to avert climate disaster will also provide jobs and revenue that are more diverse and sustainable, besides improving local air quality. Jobs and fighting climate change can go hand in hand. My faith compels me to say that we are given the job of keeping this planet livable for future generations. The time is now to adopt a strong final rule that protects communities and addresses major sources of air and climate pollution. Sadly, my husband is no longer with me, but the problem of methane pollution is. I urge you to please adopt a strong final rule that addresses these major sources of climate pollution. The future depends on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Leslie. We go now to Renee Walters. Let's see. Oh, I see Renee Walters.
Hello,
Yes, hello, Ms. Walters. Can you hear me?
I can.
I can hear you clearly. Would you spell your name, please?
Renee Walters.
Thank you. If you raise your right hand, do you swear or
Pardon?
if you would raise your right hand, and do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
I do.
Thank you. I'm going to start your 5 minutes now.
Good afternoon, and thank you to the members of the Environmental Improvement Board for taking public comments on these important environmental rules. My name is Renee Walters, and I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm a member of the First Unitarian Church of Albuquerque, and as a Unitarian, I affirm the Unitarian principles, one of which I would like to iterate here. That principle is respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. To me, that translates into sustainability, environmental, and climate justice. I strongly support strong smog and ozone precursor rules. Methane pollution in particular is an environmental, economic, and racial justice concern that needs attention, and we need to strengthen requirements to protect our communities from the harmful effects of it. In New Mexico, local communities suffer the greatest consequences from pollution caused by methane emissions. Their health and well-being are most affected. These communities are mostly rural persons of color who are often afraid to speak out against powerful interests. We need to protect those living closest to the sources of methane emissions. Greenhouse gases produced by methane emissions are 84 times more potent than carbon dioxide. They're a major factor contributing to climate change. It is unethical to continue with methane emissions that cause the destruction of the environment. Currently, the industry is out of compliance with the rules. It does not regulate itself. Methane pollution is visible from space. We have the technology to address pollution and hold operators accountable. New Mexico can become a national leader in addressing air pollution and climate impacts by adopting and strengthening requirements to cut air pollution. We must take urgent action now with strong NMED rules that will protect our communities, the environment, and the planet. Let's choose to honor the dignity of every person and the interdependent web of all existence. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Walters. Let's go now to John Ellis. See if John Ellis is on the platform. Yes, Mr. Ellis, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
You're coming through loud and clear.
Great.
If you would please spell your name.
John Elling, Ellig.
Oh, very sorry about getting the name wrong. If you would raise your right hand, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
Yes, I do.
I'm going to start your 5 minutes now.
All right. I'd like to thank you, board members, for providing public comment on this important health and environmental protection issue. My name is John Ellig, and I live in Albuquerque. By creating improvements to the proposal that cuts methane and volatile organic compounds released in New Mexico, this board, the EIB, has the opportunity to make an immediate difference in the lives of New Mexico residents and affect a healthier environment for all who live on our planet. I believe climate change is upon us, and as residents of this planet, we have a moral responsibility to protect all its living beings now and for the future. Additionally, that protection needs to begin now. Now is the time to make meaningful changes to the way oil and gas producers inspect and fix leaks, control pollution in their production and well development, redevelopment, and to cut pollution from pneumatic controllers. I recognize that as a board, your task is complex, yet I encourage your proposals to include strong rules based on the simple act of common sense when it comes to the way oil and gas producers find and fix leaks. Leaks occur in each of our lives all the time, whether it be in our roofs, our cars' tires, or the plumbing where we live. Some leaks may be simple or minor, but oil and gas leaks are more like the leaks in the heart valves of our friends or family. They are serious, with serious health consequences. Leaks related to oil and gas production are not abnormal or unique events, and leaks in the industry must be thoroughly sought out and quickly fixed. The strong proposals that you create have the effect of making New Mexico and the U.S. a healthier place to live, as well as setting a leading environmental standard for other states to follow. Common sense tells us that it's better to fix leaks now in the present rather than in the future. I encourage the board to make changes to this group, proposed changes that are necessary. Leaks in this industry are not slow, hard to find, or minor. These leaks are dangerous, polluting, unhealthy, and threatening. And the technology to fix leaks in oil and gas production exists. Let's use a common sense approach and create proposals that get them fixed effectively and in the present. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Elling. We have a final commenter who reached out through the chat. His name is Kyle Fiore, H-O-J-K. Here we go. Mr. Fiore, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, terrific. Please spell
Just a minute, I'm sorry. Just a second. Okay, yes, I can hear you very well, thank you. You hear me and my dog.
Yes. Please spell your name.
Kyle, F is in Frank, Iore.
Thank you. And if you would raise your right hand, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
Yes,
Thank you very much. I'll start your 5 minutes now.
thank you very much. My name is Kyle Fiore. I'm a member of Grant Chapel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm also a mother, a grandmother, and a great-grandmother of young people ranging in age from 22 years to 37 days. I speak today to support the ozone precursor and all strong methane rules that will protect current and future generations of New Mexican families and children. Locally, methane is a dangerous and prevalent air polluter that is causing great harm to our state. We need to protect the 130,000 New Mexican families and children living closest to oil and gas operations and the production of methane by requiring more frequent inspections to find and fix methane leaks. We need to establish and enforce requirements that demand operators control pollution when they are completing oil and gas operations or redeveloping an existing well. We also need to cut methane pollution from pneumatic controllers. We ask that the New Mexico Environmental Department require companies to inspect pneumatics for leaks and accelerate the time to retrofit equipment. These three requests, or these three proposals that I'm mentioning, would not cut jobs in the oil and gas industry. Looking at them as a layperson, I see them as something that would create more jobs, because you would be creating jobs for people who are doing the frequent inspections, people who are fixing the leaks, and people who are trying to control the pollution. And so I was very moved by the first speaker, who talked about the loss of jobs and the need to continue gas and oil. I'm not fond of the need to continue gas and oil, and I don't have the same viewpoint that she does, but I do think it's important to say that these three things that we're requesting right now do not appear to me to cut any jobs that are currently in the industry. Finally, if we are to be good stewards and respect the sacred nature of this planet that has cared so well for us through centuries, we need to stop the worldwide damage unchecked methane can cause. This damage expands far beyond New Mexico. Methane is a major contributor to global warming, as we all know. It is a wicked gas. It's responsible for 25% of the climate change people are experiencing globally. It's our responsibility as good neighbors to put in place mechanisms that will check methane today, and from my point of view, to end its production in the future, both for New Mexicans and for our neighbors across the world. Thank you very much for giving me time to speak. I know that I wasn't listed, and I appreciate your making the extra effort.
Yes, of course. Thank you very much, Ms. Fiore, for your comment. At this time, we will return to the technical case. When we broke for lunch, we had Ms. Keene being questioned by the board, and I need to go to members Bitzer, Duval, Garcia, and Honker, and then back to the vice chair. I see Ms. Keene.
Madam Hearing Officer, I have no questions.
Oh, thank you, Member Bitzer. Member Duval? You may be teaching at the moment. Member Garcia? I can't hear you. Okay,
Can you hear me?
now I can.
Okay. I had one small question. Let me find where I was. Hang on one second. In I guess it was 50.112 Part A, Item 9. There's a reference to the owner operator may request a hearing. And I think you mentioned that was a provision that was added in a couple of different places. And I'm wondering, would that be a hearing before the board, or would that be a hearing before the cabinet secretary?
Yeah, I'm trying to find the reference, and the hearing would be held before the EIB.
Okay, I think there were about at least 2 places where that was added.
I'm gonna have to jump in here. Ms. Keene, would that hearing would be held before the department, correct?
Yes. Thank you for that clarification. Yes, and I was thinking about the hearing that would be requested if we were to add areas of the state under the scope of the role. But in this case, it would be before the department secretary.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it. That's all.
Thank you. Member Honker, do you have questions of Ms. Keene?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go back to the vice chair.
Yes, thank you. Ms. Keene, I forgot to ask these questions, but I asked you about the additional personnel for companies, and what I forgot to ask was, what about additional personnel for NMED? You'd mentioned that the department would be working with operators to, and I apologize, the exact words you used, but I think the department would be working with operators to get them into a compliance schedule. Is that kind of what I understood?
Yes, Madam Trujillo Davis, there's a requirement to develop a database system to monitor and track the information that's required to be maintained under this part. And the department will be working with industry for those small, particularly the smaller operators that may not already have environmental management systems. We will be working with them to develop a template that can be used to meet the requirements of the database system.
So has the department already allocated employees that will be dedicated to this, or have they changed the scope of some employees' work already that they will be dedicated, or are they planning to hire new employees for this?
In this case, it will be our contractors are going to be starting to work on that project.
Okay, and that's already in place?
The contract is in place, correct.
Okay, thank you for answering that for me. I don't have any more questions.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Ms. Katz, is there any follow-up? Oh, wait, Madam Chair.
I apologize. I have a follow-up question to Vice Chair's line of questioning of Ms. Keene. Thank you again, Ms. Keene, for your testimony. And I was wondering if, I know NMOGA had presented some data regarding additional costs related to additional inspection and compliance. Have you looked at that?
Chair Sweeney, I'm uncertain if you're referring to the economic analysis that was provided or a separate analysis.
That economic analysis?
We did review, yes, the administrative costs, but that was outside of the scope of my direct testimony. That was testimony put on by Brian Palmer and Susan Day.
Okay, yeah, and if we can ask this at a later, I was just wondering if there given some of the changes you've made to incorporate some of the industry stakeholders' comments? Do you think that cost would be less than what was presented?
I do.
Okay, thank you for that.
All right, thank you very much. Ms. Katz, is there any redirect?
Just quickly, Ms. Keene, will the department be presenting the cost analyses and the updated cost analyses based on the changes that it is proposing in connection with the testimony on each section of the rule with respect to the particular equipment and processes?
Yes, we will.
Thanks. That's it.
All right, thank you very much. Would you like to discuss then where we're going from here?
So I believe we have a number of other witnesses on this topic from other parties.
All right. Go to Namoga then for Mr. Smitherman. All right.
Hearing officer, I believe that Mr. Smitherman does have a little bit on this topic.
All right. And Mr. Smitherman, do you need screen sharing privileges?
Yes, ma'am, please.
Okay. Should have it. Whenever you're ready.
I'm ready.
All right, Mr. Smitherman, can you please state your name for the court reporter?
John R. Smitherman.
Thank you. And you've been previously sworn in this hearing, is that correct?
Correct.
And you've previously adopted your direct and rebuttal testimony exhibits, which have been admitted, correct?
I have.
Okay. Did you prepare some slides that sort of generally summarize your rebuttal and your direct and rebuttal testimony?
I have.
And what I'd like you to do in the interest of time as expressed by the board yesterday is to perhaps touch on the topics, note where there may have been agreement reached with NMED, and then focus your time on anything where there may still be issues of concern, and then perhaps hold yourself available if there are questions from the board after that on any of the topics. Does that seem acceptable?
Certainly. Thank you very much.
Would you like to touch on would you like to proceed then with your summary? Thank you.
I will. Thank you very much, Mr. Heiser. Madam Chair, Vice Chair, board members, Madam Hearing Officer. We do have a few slides on the Section 112 general provisions and the definition of construction. This first topic really was directed towards the concept of relocation of stationary sources. NMED has accepted our input on that, and so we really don't have any further discussions on at least the engines. And by the way, in my slide, I used the word compressor here. I've highlighted it. That was a typo on my part. That should have been the word engine, because there are engine emissions limits, not compressor engine limits. Further, and along the same lines, there was also the concept of, in this light kind replacement, the concept that you might have a single emitting natural pneumatic device that needed to be replaced. And if the original language had held, you would have had to basically replace one single emitting device with a non-emitting device, which is very, very impractical. NMED has accepted that language, and we appreciate that. Also, in the original language, the very complex concept of the EMT system was included. NMED has removed that and changed that to streamline that requirement. We appreciate that. I do want to mention, though, the compliance database report is still a requirement, and that is still a very complex and challenging report to put together. Depends on the operator, depends on how complex their current information systems are, but it can be very complex, and we really appreciate the fact that this can take some time to create that. I'm talking about creating the application within their systems to generate this report. Once that's in place, once those codes are written and those databases perhaps are integrated, then generating the actual report should not be time. It takes a lot of time, but getting to that point will take a lot of time. We appreciate the opportunity to have time to get those in place. That concludes my direct and rebuttal. I do have rebuttal that we can deal with at this time or later.
I think, Madam Hearing Officer, if it's okay with you, why don't we touch on the rebuttal, and then if something comes up that we need to test, we can come back, but hopefully that won't be necessary. So, Mr. Smitherman, in the interest of keeping us moving forward, why don't you touch on your rebuttal now?
Thanks, sir. Again, along the lines of this EMT, the NMED has, as we just heard from Ms. Keene's testimony, has the obligation to identify those technologies that can allow operators to time and GPS stamp any particular activity in the field. They're going to have their list to us of acceptable technologies by January 1st of 2023. But they're only giving us 3 months to integrate that into our systems and requiring us to be using that technology by April 1st of that same year. That is simply not enough time. I have personally quite a bit of database application development experience of my own. I've written database applications, relatively simple ones, and I've been associated with or actually managed the creation of much more complex database management systems within the company I used to work for. So I'm well versed, if you will, in being able to understand the complexities and challenges that these applications represent. And in my view, the time it's going to take to, number one, choose which one of the available technologies is listed on January 1st, to acquire, to integrate this data into the devices and current company databases that already exist, to maybe modify contracts that exist, employee training, both field employees and office, and the always necessary test, fail, repair cycles that will be necessary before this can be deployed. We recognize that this is an important piece. We do not push back on achieving that. We stand ready to do so, but we need more time to be able to integrate this new technology into our existing systems. And we recommend a 2-year transition period before that is required. There's also a change that NMED accepted on pre-transaction certification. We appreciate NMED accepting our proposed language on that. If there's any questions on that, I stand ready for that as well. We also appreciate the appropriate hearing access that NMED has accepted. It seems to give us a fair opportunity to have good consideration before for example, third-party auditors are required, and also a fair opportunity to review those third-party auditor recommendations. Let's talk about the annual certification and excessive deviation reporting. This is language that came in the September 16th red line, and I am very glad that Ms. Keene touched on this, and the way she described what this certification process is in their minds is what we had hoped that they meant, and thought that they meant. But the language itself is not clear. We had quite a bit of debate amongst ourselves as to what it meant. That is a pretty good indicator that perhaps the language could be improved a bit. We would like to work with NMED to maybe perfect that language. We've actually thought about it even across the last lunch hour, thought about perhaps how it might read. This is not anything final. We really need to have more consideration and would love to have your thoughts on it as well. But for example, it might say by March 1st of each calendar year, the owner or operator shall generate a compliance database report on all assets under its control that are subject to the CDR requirements of this rule at the time the CDR is prepared, and keep this report on file for 5 years. A responsible official shall certify that this report is true, complete, and accurate. That is a starting point. Perhaps we can work together and come up with language that's satisfactory to both NMED and our industry. We've already talked about this piece here, so I'll skip over that.
And I don't believe, Madam Hearing Officer, is the definition of additional definition still in scope for this? Into the next topic. Okay, I think this is still appropriate.
Okay.
Yeah, I think commencement of operations is still part of this topic. Yeah. So NMED has included the phrase, but no later than the end of well completion operation in their definition of commencement of operation. Mr. Alexander of EDF has suggested the definition of flowback be added, and we'll talk about.
Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Smitherman, but I have commencement of operation included under storage vessels for that topic. So I don't think it's meant to be included in here in this topic.
Okay.
Fine with
perfect. Yes.
Katz. That's why I said I wasn't sure whether.
Yeah, sorry, I was not paying attention right at that moment. But yes, that's correct. It's with storage vessels, so we'll be getting to it, but not yet.
I'm happy to end. Let me make sure that there's nothing else in this section that doesn't deal with commencement of operations.
Yeah, I think the rest of that was the phases of the EDF definition, and then we've already talked on the stabilized issue. So I believe that completes what we were hoping to cover in this.
It does. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smitherman. We appreciate it. Madam Hearing Officer, we'll be happy to offer Mr. Smitherman for questions from the other parties or the board.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Heiser and Mr. Smitherman. If other council or party representatives would like to turn on their screens, if you have questions of Mr. Smitherman. I'm seeing no new screens. I will turn then to questions from the board. While I'm doing that, if you are an attendee on this platform and have a question, please reach out through the chat, which is enabled for everyone. Madam Chair, do you have questions of Mr. Smitherman on this topic? She may have stepped away. Vice Chair Trujillo Davis, do you have questions?
I do not at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Cates?
No questions at the moment.
Thank you. Member Bitzer?
I have no questions, Madam Hearing Officer. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Duvall, who may be in class. Member Garcia?
No questions. Thank you.
And Member Honker?
No questions. Thanks, Mr. Smitherman.
All right. Thank you very much. I believe then we move to IPANM and Witness Brown. Is that correct, Mr. Rose?
That is correct. Hopefully he's on the platform somewhere.
Bill?
Was there?
Remind me the first name.
Dave. Or David.
David. Okay. Yep, I see him. This platform alphabetizes by alphabetizes by first name for some reason. I have made him a panelist, so he should be joining us here. Mr. Brown, if you can turn on your screen, there you go. I don't think you've testified yet with us. If you would raise your right hand, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Mr. Brown, could you state your name for the record and spell it?
David Brown, DavidBrown.
And Mr. Brown, could you give the board a brief description of your educational and work background?
Yes, I have a undergraduate degree and a master's degree. My work experience is I have 44 years of experience working in the upstream oil and gas industry. And that has ranged from everything from land use, permitting and compliance to environmental compliance as well.
And Mr. Brown, with whom are you employed?
I'm currently employed by DJR Energy.
And could you explain to the board who DJR Energy is and what you do for them?
Yes, I'm the manager of regulatory government and public affairs. And DJR is a operator. All of our assets are located in the San Juan Basin of New Mexico. We don't operate anywhere else except the San Juan Basin of New Mexico. And we have vertical wells, old vertical wells, as well as newer horizontal oil and gas producing wells.
And for the board members, we're talking about Mr. Brown's direct testimony is IPA&M Exhibit 4. His resume is Exhibit 5. And he submitted rebuttal testimony, which is Exhibit 11. And Mr. Brown, have you reviewed the department's revised draft rules that were submitted, I believe, on the 16th of this month?
Yes, I have.
And rather than going, well, first let me get you, ask you whether you adopt your pre-filed direct and rebuttal testimony as your testimony in this proceeding.
Yes.
With respect to the department's September 16th version, could you explain to the board your review and whether the changes the department is proposing deals with your concerns that were expressed in your direct testimony, and if not, explain why not?
Yes, so I'll focus on the equipment monitoring tag provisions or in the original proposal. In the September 16th proposal, they have been eliminated. And that is something that we totally support, and that was a concern in my direct testimony as well. So we appreciate that has been deleted. I will continue on with my other parts of the items I want to discuss real quick. Wanted to talk about the provision that's incorporated with the compliance database review, the CDR. And I would echo the previous witnesses' comments that the CDR, the compliance database reports can be very cumbersome and they take some time. I think the changes made here will help simplify that. The biggest change I see in the section here was in subsection 8, sub B. And there, a new requirement was placed that had to do with date and timestamps, including GPS display for the location where the monitoring event's taking place. The rule change also mentioned that the department is going to publish a list of approved technologies to comply with the requirement. And as mentioned earlier, that would be January 1st, 2023, as Ms. King testified. It also says owner operators have to comply with this by April 2nd of 2023. So I want to make some comments about that provision in general about or specific recommendations to consider. The thing to keep in mind is that in our experience, from my experience, is that if you're going to timestamp something and use it from the field, you're going to have some type of mobile application. And that would have to be uploaded into web-based software where it can accumulate the information so you can compile it and get the work done. And to get a system to do that, not the app, but just a system to do that can be very time consuming and expensive if you don't have something already. And in our case, it involves outside consulting can help us develop that. And most small companies that are members of IPNM don't have the ability to build something that themselves. So you're going to be looking toward outside consulting to help you develop it. But I think that's an important step is that Ms. Keene mentioned that there could be some free apps that companies could access to at least load up the data. But in my estimation, there has to be a mechanism for it to be uploaded into some type of central server so it can be used for generating reports. So I have a few recommendations I just wanted to mention. I think Ms. Keene mentioned that they were going to go out and maybe survey what companies already have in terms of this kind of an approach. And that's something we totally support at IPNM. I do think that's important to do because if companies already have systems in place and it's not on the approved list, it could cause some real issues for companies who already have something in place. Secondly, 4 months to get this implemented is just simply not enough time. As Mr. Smitherman mentioned before, to get this all set up and running properly you just cannot do it 4 months. Again, we have a system out here, and to change that and get that to work and get all our employees trained and contractors, 4 months is not enough time. So I concur with Mr. Smitherman's recommendations that we need 2 years to implement that. Third, I just want to point out that some of the really small companies with limited wells production are going to have a hard time trying to get the system to work, particularly if you haven't uploaded into a central server and they don't have one already to do that. So I would like to suggest that maybe there be an off-ramp for situations where if a company is only generating one report, and when I look at the rules, it appears to me that at least even the smallest of companies will have to do at least one leak detection and repair survey. And if that's true, to have to build a system like this just for one report that be done annually seems to be a heavy lift. So I was suggesting that there be an off-ramp, and the language should be similar to what's in 8 sub B that says prior to April 1st, 2023, which is the date that's proposed for this to be in place by the operators. It says here that owners or operators can comply or shall comply with this requirement by making a written or electronic record of the data in time of any effective monitoring event. So I'm just suggesting in cases where where a company has very limited reporting, that maybe something like that could be considered. My last item that I want to discuss is the independent verification of data, or what I refer to as third-party audit. That was mentioned by Ms. Keene. There were changes made to it, and I'm not going to get into those again. They've already been discussed. We support those changes from IPNM. I just want to make one point that part of the changes made was to narrow the applicability of the proposal, and I have one additional one I'd like to make. So it's important to understand that these costs are not just for a third party. I've been on the receiving end of audit, and I've done audits before, and it requires the company to devote resources of its own to help the auditor to get the job done. And so those may not be direct cost, but it takes time away from people's work at the business to help the auditor to get or to facilitate getting the audit done. So the additional narrowing that we would suggest is that they be limited to cases of probable extensive non-compliance. That's all I have to present.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. One additional item just that we skipped over in terms of your qualifications. My understanding is you've served on the Colorado Air Quality Control Commission. Could you explain what you did with the commission and your years of experience there?
Yes, I served one term on the Colorado Air Quality Control Commission. Similar to what all of you are doing on the board, reviewing proposed new regulations, dealing with issues that come up in terms of guidance to the staff, similar types of things that you're doing. So I definitely respect all of you who are on the board who are sitting through this process because I've sat in your chair. So thank you for your service, by the way.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. I have no further questions and would offer Mr. Brown for questions.
All right, thank you. I see Ms. Katz on the screen. Ms. Katz?
Thank you, Madam Hearing Officer. Hello, Mr. Brown. Good to see you. I am just wondering if, just wanted to ask you if IPA&M was planning to submit some suggested language regarding the changes, suggestions that you've discussed here this afternoon.
I believe we are, but yes, I think I could say that. I'll defer to our attorney, but I think that's the plan.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other parties who would like to turn on their screen? No, I don't see any other parties. I will turn to the board for their questions while I'm doing that. In the event you're on this platform as an attendee and you have a question, please direct it to me in the chat. Madam Chair, do you have questions of Mr. Brown?
Madam Hearing Officer, as long as IPA&M can continue to work with NMED on some of the issues that Mr. Brown brought up, as Ms. Katz was mentioning, I think I don't have any questions right now.
All right, thank you. Vice Chair Trujillo Davis.
I don't have any questions, but I echo Member Sweena's comments. I would like to see IPA&M make some recommendations and at least give us an opportunity to review those in writing. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Cates?
And I would third what my cohort said there. A question for Mr. Brown, just to pull it back a little bit. I've heard anecdotally and just talking to friends and acquaintances that the San Juan Basin as an oil, or well, possibly as an oil producing region, but as a gas producing region has been in decline for some years. Is that the case?
Well, all wells decline, and a lot of the older wells here in the basin are natural gas. They've been around for a long time and they are declining. But the area where they're seeing new development is an area where we operate in, which is the southern part of the basin, where there's an oil window there. And that's where a lot of the new activity is taking place. And there's several companies developing that right now. So there's some upside for oil production in the San Juan Basin right now. And
is it DJR, right? How big a company is that? Like in terms of how many rigs do you have? How many employees? What kind of metrics could you put on it to describe how big it is?
Okay, so I'll be glad to. So we have about 78, 80 employees out here in Aztec, New Mexico. We have a home office in Denver, which has 16 people. Right now we've got 400 vertical wells, and we have 126 horizontal wells, which are in the oil window. We have 2 drilling rigs running right now. And so we're active and planning to continue to be active in the future.
Yeah. So back to the question of decline. I mean, relative to the Permian, it's not as what's the word? Is not as promising a play, I suppose, as the Permian is. Would that be a fair sort of characterization of, yeah?
Well, one thing I do want to mention is that there's been some people in the northern end of the basin who have drilled some horizontal gas wells, which have been very good wells. So there may be some upside there for horizontal development in the gas formations, which have had a lot of vertical wells. Maybe additional potential there, and that's what they're looking for up there. So I think there's still upside for the San Juan Basin. I do.
All right. Yeah, that answers what I was wondering about. So I appreciate the testimony and the time. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Member Bitzer, any questions?
Following on Mr. Cate's line of questioning about the San Juan Basin, in the interest of full disclosure, I drive a Honda Civic that runs on natural gas, 10% greener than a Prius as it rolls down the road, by the way. So,
okay.
According to the total carbon footprint study, but so I followed natural gas prices with some voyeuristic interest over the years, just curiosity. But it seems to me that part of the problem for the San Juan might also be that the price has been so low. If the price were to come back, is there some, like you said, I guess I heard part of the answer to that, there's some upside still in the San Juan. Would that be accelerated if you got a 30-40% increase in the cost of natural gas?
Quite possibly, yes. Yes.
That's all I have, Madam Hearing Officer.
Thank you.
Has Member Duvall rejoined us? Member Duvall? Member Garcia?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you, and Member Honker?
Thank you, Mr. Brown, for your testimony. Very interesting. I have no questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rose, any redirect?
No, Madam Hearing Officer, that completes our presentation on this issue.
All right. I see Mr. Jano on screen. Mr. Jano, is this about Mr. Brown, or is this about Mr. Holderman coming up?
About Mr. Holderman.
Terrific. All right. Thank you again, Mr. Brown. We're now going to move to Oxy and return to Mr. Holderman on this topic.
Thank you.
Madam Hearing Officer, I have Mr. Holderman here with me right now. Oxy is really pleased to report, though, that in light of conversations that the company had with the environmental groups, the NMED, that our comments with regard to equipment monitoring tags, timing for database submittals, and pre-sale compliance certifications have all been addressed in the August 16th submittal. So we're prepared to put Mr. Holderman up for cross-examination, but would otherwise rest on the testimony that was previously submitted.
Thank you so much. Our magical morning meeting is already working. All right. Thank you for that. Let me turn to the board for any questions they might have. And while we are doing that, if you're on the platform as an attendee and have a question, please put it in the chat. Welcome back, Mr. Holderman. I'll start with you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Hearing Officer, and I'm glad to hear there's been some progress on our efficiency, and I just encourage that the stakeholders continue to work with NMED and the other various stakeholders to address the concerns. So I appreciate that. Thank you. No questions at this time.
All right, thank you. Vice Chair Trujillo Davis.
I don't have any questions either. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Cates?
No questions here. Thank you.
Member Bitzer?
No questions. Thank you.
All right. Member Garcia?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. And Member Honker?
Yes, just one thing. I thought I heard your counsel say August 16th revisions by NMED. I assume he meant September 16th.
Yes, sir. September 16th.
Okay. Thank you. No other questions.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you, Mr. Holderman, for rejoining us. And thank you, Mr. Jano, for working through that. I believe the next witness will be from GCA. It's Witness Copeland.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Hearing Officer, Madam Chair, members of the Environmental Improvement Board. My name is Christina Sheehan, and I am appearing on behalf of the Gas Compressor Association in this proceeding, along with co-counsel Stuart Boutier and Whit Swift. As a housekeeping matter, Madam Hearing Officer, because this is GCA's first technical witness, if it would make sense to do so at this point in time, I would suggest to enter into the hearing record all of the GCA's exhibits, which have been labeled GCA Exhibit 1 to GCA Exhibit 34. I don't think any party has submitted any sort of objections to these exhibits. I will note that this does not include GCA Exhibit 35, which Mr. Swift circulated to the parties this morning.
All right, thank you very much for that. I'm not aware that there were objections to the first 34 of them, but let me pause for a moment in the event there is an objection. No. GCA Exhibits 1 through 34 then admitted. I did panelize Mr. Copeland there. Mr. Copeland, I'll ask you to spell your name.
Yes, it's MARKCOPELAND.
Thank you. And if you would raise your right hand, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
I do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Hearing Officer. For the board's benefit, the exhibits associated with Mr. Copeland's testimony are GCA Exhibits 15, which is his direct pre-filed written testimony, GCA Exhibit 16, which is his resume, and GCA Exhibit 30, which is his direct rebuttal testimony. Mr. Copeland, could you please state your name for the record?
Yes, good afternoon, Madam Hearing Officer and Madam Chairman and the board. My name is Mark Copeland.
What is your current employment position?
I'm the Director of Field Operations Support and Service for Archrock.
What role does Archrock play in the oil and gas industry in New Mexico?
Archrock is a compression service provider. We own natural gas compression equipment that we use to compress our customers' gas. This gas is both on the production side of oil and gas at the well, also pushing product all the way to the pipeline and processing plants. The key component of a gas compressor is a gas-driven engine that helps to compress that gas.
Thank you, Mr. Copeland. Can you please briefly describe your educational and professional qualifications?
Sure. I have a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering. I have over 30 years of experience in the natural gas compressor industry and 15 years of exploration and production industry. I have the last 21 years, I have been with Archrock, the largest contract compression service company in the U.S. 3 of the years I have spent in New Mexico as a regional manager. The last 15 years I have spent in the role of involving monitoring compliance, among other things, of air regulations, NESHAP Quad Z, NSPS Quad O, and other state regulatory agencies, along with developing operation and maintenance process improvements.
A copy of your resume has been provided as GCA Exhibit 16. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And you have submitted pre-filed direct written testimony in this proceeding, which has been provided as GCA Exhibit 15. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Do you have any changes to your direct pre-filed written testimony?
I do not.
Do you adopt this testimony here today?
I do.
Mr. Copeland, what is the general purpose of your direct written testimony in this proceeding regarding Section 112 of the proposed rule?
The general purpose of my direct written testimony regarding Section 112 was the proposed rule to request the removal of equipment monitoring tags, EMTs, and its related database requirements in Section 112.A 3 through 10 in the proposed rule.
Could you please summarize your pre-filed direct written testimony as it pertains to Section 112?
Yes, my pre-filed direct written testimony discusses the GCA's proposed deletion of Section 112.A 3 through 10. The May 6th version of the proposed rule contains requirements for owners and operators of sources to attach EMTs to each source requiring such physical tags, and for the creation, population, and maintenance of the database of source data from which a CDR may be produced. In my direct testimony, I explain why, in my opinion, the EMT and the database concepts as presented in the May 6th version of the proposed rule should be removed. My direct testimony explained the concepts and of that aspect of the proposed rule were unclear and hard to implement and abide by, and that is why the provisions would have ended up costing a significant amount of money for the owners and operators. I do not object to the obligation of conducting a compliance demonstration requirements established elsewhere in the proposed rule, or the rule language requiring that owners operators be required to maintain records of that compliance data. The main issue was the CDR database requirements in the May 6th version of the proposed rule, the lack of clarity, what constitutes a source, and the inapplicability and unavailability of certain information based on the broad definition of source. Changes found by NMED September 16th version of the proposed rule appears to have addressed our concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Copeland. Have you submitted pre-filed written rebuttal testimony in this proceeding, which has been provided as GCA Exhibit 30?
Yes, I have.
Do you have any changes to your pre-filed written rebuttal testimony?
I do not.
And do you adopt your pre-filed written rebuttal testimony here today?
I do not. I'm sorry, wrong.
No problem. Can you briefly summarize your written rebuttal testimony?
Yes, my written rebuttal testimony addressed the proposal by Wild Earth Guardians to add a new paragraph in section 112 that would require all owners, operators to submit records of all monitoring events documenting deviations from the proposed rule on a semi-annual basis. I explained why NMED and the board should reject this proposal for a variety of reasons, including the proposed rule already includes significant and sufficient compliance demonstration of the requirements. The new reporting requirement requested by Wild Earth Guardians would impose unjustified additional burden and cost of both MNED and the regulatory community. There's no evidence of how the additional burdens and costs would result in a benefit of the MED enforcement or provide environmental improvement. The kind of deviation self-reporting that Wild Earth Guardians is seeking has only been imposed under the EPA Air Operating Permit program that applies to major sources, not the minor sources, which that will be subject to the proposed rule. Minor sources subject to state oil and gas rules are not subject to that kind of self-reporting requirement in Colorado or any other jurisdictions that I am aware of.
Thank you, Mr. Copeland. Does that conclude your direct and rebuttal testimony on this section?
Yes, it does.
For efficiency and continuity purposes, I'm going to go ahead and move on to rebuttal. Mr. Copeland, were you present for the department's direct and rebuttal testimony regarding section 112?
Yes.
And have you reviewed NMED Rebuttal Exhibit 23?
I have.
Are the GCA's proposed amendments to section 112, which you discussed, addressed in NMED Rebuttal Exhibit 23?
Not in their entirety. In section 112A, MED did remove the EMT concept, but the CDR database requirements remain in section A 3 through 6 of the proposed rule.
Are your concerns regarding section 112 of the proposed rule fully addressed by NMED's amendments to the section as set forth in NMED Rebuttal Exhibit 23?
Yes.
Would you encourage the Environmental Improvement Board to adopt the department's section 112 provisions as set forth in NMED Rebuttal Exhibit 23, which is the September 16th version of the rule?
Yes, I would encourage the EIB to adopt their rules. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Copeland. Does this conclude your testimony on this issue in this proceeding?
Yes, it does. Thank you, Madam Hearing Officer. The GCA tenders their witness from this point, I can answer questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Copeland and Ms. Sheehan. Let me pause for a moment for other parties to present themselves on screen. I see Mr. Nykiel. Mr. Nykiel, do you have questions of Mr. Copeland?
Yes, please, Madam Hearing Officer. And before I start, I would like to try again, if you wouldn't mind, seeing if you could grant me permission to share my screen. We'll see if it works this time around. Okay, I think that's going to work this time. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Mr. Copeland. My name is Matt Nykiel. I'm here on behalf of Wild Earth Guardians. So to start, you testified that the reporting requirements of the proposed rule will ensure that the department will be in prompt receipt of all of the compliance demonstration reports that have to be maintained under the proposed rule. Is that right?
That is correct.
But would you agree that if the department doesn't request those reports, they won't receive them?
I'm not, my understanding was there was an annual requirement. I could be wrong.
Okay. And do you recall if the annual requirement you're thinking of is the annual compliance demonstration that is required under subsection C of section 112 of the proposed rule?
That could be, I would have to look it back up.
Okay. See if I can help direct you briefly. Okay, can you see this is NMED rebuttal exhibit 23. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. Just going to direct your attention to section 112, which is the topic we're speaking of at the moment. General provisions and subsection C. Could you read, this would be subsection C3. Could you read starting at line 12, number 3 there?
Okay.
Would you mind reading that out, please, for the benefit of the board?
By March 1 of each calendar year, the owner or operator shall conduct a compliance evaluation and prepare an electronic record certifying the compliance status of each source subject to this part with all terms, conditions, and applicable requirements of this part. Compliance evaluation and certification shall include all sources subject to this part for the previous calendar year.
Thank you, Mr. Copeland. So there isn't a requirement that that annual compliance report be submitted to the department, right?
Can you restate your question?
Sure, thank you. In that rule, there's no language that requires an owner or operator to submit that annual compliance report to the department unless it is requested.
In that language, correct.
Thank you. I'd like to move on to a different topic. You testified that there's no evidence that Guardian's proposal would improve environmental protection or dissuade any non-compliant bad actors. Is that right?
I haven't seen any. That is correct.
And Did you happen to hear the department's witness, Miss Cindy Hollenberg, testify this week?
I don't think I remember hearing hers, no.
Okay. I'm going to stop sharing this particular screen for the moment.
And Madam Hearing Officer, I just, sorry to jump in, but I ask, for the interest of time, that perhaps Mr. Nykiel could make these points through his witness, who is scheduled to come up here very soon, rather than try to do it all through cross on other witnesses, right? Just in the interest of time. I mean, if you insist that you need to do that, but I think it would move things a lot faster to not do it that way.
Mr. Nykiel, it is usually more efficient that way.
Give me one moment, just really briefly.
Okay.
I think we can do that.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Let's see. Are there other parties with questions of Mr. Copeland? Please turn on your screen. No. I'll turn then to questions from the board. If you're an attendee on this platform and have a question, please reach out through chat. Madam Chair, do you have questions of Mr. Copeland?
Madam Hearing Officer, I don't have any questions at this time.
Thank you. Vice Chair Trujillo Davis?
I do not have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Cates?
No questions here.
Thank you. Member Bitzer?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Duval, I don't think he's teaching. Member Garcia?
No questions, thank you.
And Member Honker?
No questions.
Thank you. Ms. Sheehan, will there be any follow-up at this time?
Yes, Madam Hearing Officer, just one quick question for clarification. Mr. Copeland, did you mean that the annual compliance certificate would be available to NMED upon request promptly? Is that what you meant?
That is correct.
Thank you, Madam Hearing Officer. No further questions.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Copeland and Ms. Sheehan. We do need a break. Let's take 15 minutes. As I understand it, we will turn next to CDG and witnesses Cooper and Marquez, whom I will make panelists right now. So let's come back at 2:50, please.